The pen barely touched the paper before the notary slid the folder across the desk toward me. She smiled the way people do when they know they're handing you something that took years to earn. I signed my name on the last line, and the ink hadn't even dried before I felt tears threatening the back of my eyes. I blinked them down. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of anyone. I walked out to the parking garage alone, pressed my back against my car door, and let out a breath so long it felt like I'd been holding it for 3 years. Because honestly, I had been. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building in a quiet part of Cincinnati. Not flashy, not enormous, just clean and mine. 2 bedrooms, big windows, a kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook in. To most people, it probably looked ordinary. To me, it looked like the ending of a very long sentence I'd been writing since I was 22. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my cousins, not a single person in the family group chat. I had learned a long time ago that in my family, good news travels fast and gets twisted faster. Success wasn't something you got to keep quiet and celebrate privately. It became a referendum. It became everyone's opinion about what you should have done with the money instead. I had seen it happen enough times that I knew better than to hand them ammunition before I had 4 solid walls around me. So I kept my mouth shut. I told my 2 closest friends from work and nobody else. The day I got the keys, I drove straight there from the notary's office. I let myself in, dropped my bag on the floor of the empty living room, and just stood there. The afternoon light came through the west window and hit the hardwood in long gold strips. The whole place smelled like fresh paint and something clean that didn't belong to anyone else yet. I had worked double shifts in the emergency room for 2.5 years to save that down payment. I had eaten lunch from vending machines to avoid spending money at the hospital cafeteria. I had worn the same pair of running shoes until the soles cracked because new ones could wait. I had transferred money into savings before I paid anything else, every single paycheck, like a ritual. Some people pray every morning. I saved. And I had done it all while sending money home every month to help my brother and his wife cover rent on their place across town. I want to be clear about that part, because it matters to what came later. I wasn't just some person who kept to herself and saved without any competing obligations. I was supporting 2 households. My brother had been laid off twice in 4 years. His wife worked part-time. They had a son, my nephew, who was 7 and had his grandmother's eyes and his father's complete inability to manage expectations. My brother wasn't a bad person. He was passive in a way that had always frustrated me, the kind of man who let other people drive the car while he sat in the passenger seat and watched. The one doing the driving, always, was my sister-in-law. She had a talent for framing her wants as other people's obligations. She did it so smoothly you almost didn't notice until you were already 3 steps past the line you swore you'd hold. The first time she called to ask if I could cover their groceries for the month, she started with how hard things were, and how much my nephew missed me, and how she knew I was doing so well at the hospital. By the time she got to the actual request, I had already softened. That was her skill. She warmed you up before she asked for anything. I had been sending them $300 a month for almost a year when I started saving seriously for the apartment. I didn't stop. I just started working harder to make both things possible, because stopping felt like abandoning my nephew. He wasn't the one who made bad financial decisions. He was just a kid who needed stability. But I never told anyone in the family I was saving. Not my mother, not my aunt who asked about my finances every Christmas, and especially not my sister-in-law. She had this quality where information became currency. If she knew I was saving, she would find a way to redirect it. I had watched her do it before, redirecting my mother's tax return, redirecting my cousin's bonus into a family trip no one actually wanted. Information was power in her hands, and I wasn't giving her any. So the apartment stayed my secret until I had the keys. I spent my first night there on an air mattress borrowed from a coworker, the kind that deflates just enough by morning to make your back ache. I didn't care. I lay there in the dark with the window cracked and listened to the sounds of the building settling around me. Not a single voice I recognized. Not one obligation pressing through the walls. Just the low hum of the city 4 floors down and the sound of my own breathing. I thought about the conversation I'd had with my sister-in-law at Thanksgiving, 2 years before. My mother had made an offhand comment about how I was doing well financially, and my sister-in-law had leaned forward with that look she gets when she scents an opening. She said, "Well, if that's true, maybe we should talk about something bigger, like finding a place together. A house, maybe. Enough room for everyone." I had looked at her across the table and said I didn't think that made sense. She had smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "You don't have kids yet," she said. "You don't need the space. We could split the expenses, and you'd be helping the family." Helping her, she meant. I had changed the subject, but I never forgot it. After 2 weeks of sleeping on the air mattress, real furniture started arriving. A couch, a bed frame, a kitchen table I found secondhand and sanded down myself. I set up my coffee maker first, the way people who have gone without something for a long time always reach for it first when they finally have the room. I invited a coworker named Dana over for dinner the 3rd week. She brought wine and spent the first 5 minutes standing in the middle of the living room saying it was perfect. We ate takeout on the floor because I didn't have chairs yet and laughed about it until we were leaning against the couch cushions. It was the most at home I had felt in years. I should have known the quiet wouldn't last. A nurse I worked with had a habit of posting everything to social media. She was the kind of person who documented her entire life in real time, not maliciously, just compulsively. She came by one afternoon to drop off a plant she'd bought me as a housewarming gift, a small potted succulent she carried in like it was precious cargo, and she took a photo of it on my windowsill and posted it. She tagged me. The caption said something about celebrating my coworker's new place. I saw it 30 minutes after she posted it and felt my stomach drop. I wasn't tagged in a way that revealed my address. There was no landmark visible, no building number, nothing identifiable in the frame. Just the window, the plant, the afternoon light. I told myself I was overthinking it. By morning, my sister-in-law had liked the photo and left a comment. "Cute. Where is this?" I didn't respond. I archived the post from my side and moved on, but 2 days later, my brother called. "Hey," he said, his voice carefully casual in the way it gets when she's told him what to say. "We saw you got a place." "That's great. We'd love to come see it." I asked how he found out. "She looked you up," he said, like it was nothing. "You know how she is." I told him I was still getting settled and would let him know when I was ready for visitors. He didn't push. He never pushed. He just passed the message back, and the real pushing came from the other direction. She texted me that same afternoon. "I heard you've been settling into your new place. How exciting. I know you've been working so hard. I bet it's really nice. My nephew keeps asking about his aunt. You should have us over this weekend. Not could we come. Should. Like the invitation was already issued and I was just confirming the time. I didn't answer. Not right away. When I finally did, I said I would let them know once I was ready. She replied with a smiley face and nothing else, which was worse than an argument because it meant she was patient. Patience for my sister-in-law was a strategy, not a virtue. The following weekend, I looked out my window and saw her car idling in the visitor lot below. She hadn't called, hadn't texted first. She was just there, my brother in the passenger seat, my nephew pressing his face against the rear window. I stepped back from the glass. I didn't buzz them up. After 15 minutes, they drove away. She texted later. "We stopped by, but I guess you were out." Next time, I stared at the message for a long time. She had found the building. She didn't have my unit number, but buildings like mine had intercoms and directories. All she needed was my last name. I was careful after that. I didn't share my floor or unit with anyone outside of Dana and one other coworker I trusted completely. I changed my profile settings online. I asked the building's front desk not to confirm my unit number to walk-in visitors. She found it anyway. I never knew exactly how. My best guess was that she asked around the building until someone mentioned seeing a young woman in scrubs on the 4th floor. Small buildings talk. People are friendly without knowing they shouldn't be. She showed up on a Tuesday evening while I was home from a 12-hour shift, still in my work clothes, eating cereal over the sink because I was too tired to cook. My intercom buzzed. Before I could even speak, her voice came through bright and warm. "It's us. We were just nearby and thought we'd finally see the place. My nephew has been begging." I didn't want to deny my nephew. That was the part she had always counted on. He was 7 and innocent, and he really had been asking about me. I buzzed them up. She walked in the way she had always walked into rooms that weren't hers. Not rude exactly, just without hesitation, like she'd been invited ahead of time and I was just catching up. She turned a slow circle in the entryway the way someone does when they're calculating something. "Oh," she said, "this is really nice." It wasn't a compliment. It was an appraisal. My nephew ran to me and hugged my waist, and I held on to him for a second longer than necessary because I needed one real thing in the room. My brother stood near the door with his hands in his jacket pockets looking vaguely apologetic for reasons he couldn't name. She moved through the apartment without being offered a tour. She opened the pantry. She leaned into the second bedroom doorway and made a sound of appreciation. She said my nephew would love having a room like this. She said it like she was imagining it already. I guided her back toward the living room. I hadn't slept more than 5 hours. I wasn't capable of a long visit. When they left, I locked the door and stood against it with my eyes closed. The next morning, I called the building office and asked about their guest key policy. The manager told me that in some circumstances, authorized contacts could request a temporary access card for a unit. I asked who had been listed on my account. She checked. My sister-in-law had called the office 2 days after my brother first reached out to me and told the front desk coordinator that she was my emergency contact and needed to verify my unit number. She had not gotten a key at that point, but she had confirmed my unit. I updated my emergency contact that day. I changed it to Dana. I noted in the file that no family members were authorized to receive any information about my unit. I thought I had covered it. 3 weeks later, I left for a nursing conference in Chicago. 4 days, professional development, hospital paid. I had done the prep I thought was necessary. I had told no one in the family I was leaving. My plants were on a timer drip. I had asked Dana to check my mail. The first night was fine. The second was fine. The third night, just after 10, Dana texted me. "Hey, is your sister-in-law supposed to be at your place? I just saw lights on through your window when I drove past." I read the message twice. I called Dana. She answered immediately. "I stopped at the light on your corner," she said. "Your lights were on and I could see movement. I thought maybe you came back early. I'm in Chicago," I said. "I know. That's why I'm texting you." I pulled up the camera app on my phone. I had installed a small system before I left, 2 indoor cameras and 1 at my door, motion activated, linked to my phone. I had done it not because I was paranoid, but because I had learned during that first visit that my instincts about this woman were not wrong. The living room camera showed my sister-in-law sitting in my armchair. My brother was on the couch. My nephew was running between the rooms. There was another woman I didn't recognize sitting at my kitchen table, and what looked like open takeout containers spread across my counter. My hands went cold. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and looked at the screen for a long time. The rational part of my brain ran through every possible explanation. There was no rational explanation. She was in my apartment without my permission, and she hadn't entered through the front door intercom system because that would have buzzed my phone. I remembered the visit, the way she had moved through the space without being invited, the way she had opened the pantry, the way her eyes had tracked the key hook near my door, where I kept my spare. I hadn't noticed anything wrong with my spare after the visit, but she was practiced at things I wasn't looking for. I sat in that hotel room and did not call her. I did not text my brother. I didn't spiral, even though every muscle in my chest wanted to. I thought about what my father used to say when things went sideways at work. Name the problem exactly, then solve it exactly. The problem was unauthorized entry into my home. The solution was documented and legal. I called the non-emergency police line for Cincinnati first. The officer who answered was calm and thorough. He asked if I had visual confirmation of unauthorized occupants. I said yes and described what I was seeing on the camera. He asked if I wanted to dispatch officers. I said yes. Then I called Dana. She was already on her way back to the building. I asked her to wait outside and let the officers know I had called and that I was the unit owner. She said she would. She also said she was sorry this was happening, in the quiet way people say it when they mean it. I kept the camera feed open on my phone. About 20 minutes after I made the call, I saw the light from the hallway fill the frame as someone knocked on the door. My sister-in-law stood up slowly. She walked to the door the way she walked into rooms, without hesitation. She opened it. I watched her face change. The officer's voice came through the audio, muffled but firm. She started talking immediately, gesturing, explaining. My brother appeared behind her. The unknown woman at the table stood up. My nephew, bless him, sat down on the couch like he sensed the temperature in the room had shifted. They were asked to step into the hallway. I couldn't see them anymore, but I could hear the low, serious tones of a conversation going nowhere good for her. I asked the dispatcher to note that I was the leaseholder, that I had not authorized entry, and that I was available by phone for any questions the officers needed answered. The dispatcher patched me through. I gave my name, my unit number, my lease information, and confirmed I was out of town. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges for unlawful entry. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner. I thought about the car in the parking lot. I thought about the appraisal in her eyes when she turned in my entryway. I thought about every month of double shifts and vending machine lunches. Yes, I said. I want it on record. She called me 11 minutes after the officers left. I watched the phone ring and didn't pick up. She called twice more. Then my brother called. Then an unknown number, which I didn't answer either. I turned off the camera feed, lay back on the hotel bed, and stared at the ceiling. I flew home the following morning, a day early. I went straight to the building, walked up to my floor, and stood in the middle of my living room. Everything looked intact. The takeout containers had been thrown away. The throw blanket on my couch had been refolded wrong. A candle on my shelf had been moved 2 inches from where I left it. Small things. The kind of things you only notice when you know exactly where everything was. I changed the locks that afternoon, not because I hadn't thought to before, but because I had updated the building policy and I had trusted it, which was the same kind of mistake you only make once. I called a locksmith who came within 2 hours, changed all 3 locks, and handed me a new set of keys I immediately duplicated once and gave to Dana. Then I sat at my kitchen table and opened the camera footage from the building entry log. The building, like most managed properties, kept a swipe record for the main doors. I requested mine from the office. The manager, who by now understood the situation, pulled it without argument. The swipe record showed a guest access card being used to enter the building on the evening in question. I traced it back. 6 weeks earlier, a guest card had been issued from the building's front desk. The coordinator who had issued it had noted an emergency contact had requested it. I had updated my emergency contact. But the card had been issued before I updated it. She had planned this. The police report was filed. The building pulled the coordinator's records and issued a formal notice that the guest card was invalidated. The coordinator, who was genuinely mortified, apologized in person and explained that my sister-in-law had called claiming I was unreachable and she needed access to water my plants before they died. It sounded exactly like her. My sister-in-law called 12 more times over the next 3 days. I saved every voicemail without listening to them. My brother came to the building in person and buzzed my unit. I answered the intercom and told him I wasn't able to talk right now and that he should have his wife stop calling. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She didn't think it was a big deal." "I want you to really think about that sentence," I said, "because that's the sentence I'm going to hear in my head every time anyone asks me to explain my side of this." He left. My aunt called 2 days after that. She had heard from my mother who had heard from my brother. She used the word overreacting. She said, family is family. She said my sister-in-law hadn't meant any real harm. I asked her a single question. "If I let myself into your home without permission and had dinner there while you were away, would you call that harmless?" She said that was different. I asked how. She said she'd talk to me when I calmed down. I told her I was perfectly calm, and that was actually the point. She hung up. I had expected the family pressure. I had prepared for it the way you prepare for weather you know is coming. You can't stop it, but you can put on the right coat. My coat was the police report, the camera footage, the swipe log, and the very clear knowledge that I had done nothing wrong. What I hadn't expected was how much lighter I felt once the calls stopped. That took about 2 weeks. The flurry of texts and voicemails and third-party interventions faded, the way family drama always eventually fades when the person on the receiving end stops providing a reaction. I didn't argue. I didn't explain myself to anyone who hadn't asked. I just held the line. My sister-in-law sent one final text. It was long. It talked about everything she had done for the family, how hard things were financially, how she had only been trying to give my nephew a nice evening. She said I had humiliated her. She said she hoped I was happy in my apartment all alone. I read it twice. Then I saved it in the same folder as the voicemails and screenshots and did not reply. Dana brought dinner over the following Friday. We sat at my kitchen table, the one I had sanded down and refinished, and ate pasta she had made from scratch. She asked if I was okay. I thought about it for a real second instead of just saying yes. I think I'm actually fine, I said, which surprised me. She said it shouldn't surprise me. She said I had handled it with more composure than most people would have. I told her it helped having documentation. She laughed. But the truth was that the documentation was only part of it. The other part was something that had been building for years without me naming it. I had spent my entire 20s managing the weight of other people's crises. I had sent money home while eating vending machine food. I had answered calls at midnight about problems I hadn't caused. I had been the reliable one, the steady one, the one who showed up. And I had done all of it without being asked to stop. That was the part nobody in the family talked about. Not what I had done, but the fact that it had never been enough to make me exempt from the next ask. Buying the apartment in silence had been my one unilateral decision. No committee vote, no family consensus, no permission granted, just me deciding that I had earned something and claiming it. The violation my sister-in-law committed wasn't just about the unlawful entry. It was about the message behind it. That my things were available. That my space was communal. That my hard work existed to fill her gaps. I had spent years folding myself into shapes that made other people comfortable. The apartment was the shape that fit only me. On a Sunday morning 3 weeks after everything settled, I made coffee, opened the west window, and sat on the floor of my living room the way I had on the very first day, except now there was a real couch behind me and a real rug under me and a shelf of books I had finally unpacked. The light came through exactly the same as it had that first afternoon, long and golden across the hardwood. I thought about my nephew. That part still hurt, not in a way that made me regret my decisions, but in the honest way that some costs are real even when the choice is right. I had texted my brother separately, not my sister-in-law, and told him my nephew was always welcome to visit if he was dropped off by someone I trusted. My brother hadn't responded yet. I didn't know if he would. That uncertainty had its own weight. But I had stopped confusing guilt with responsibility. Those are not the same thing, and it had taken me longer than I wanted to admit to learn the difference. A neighbor 2 doors down knocked that afternoon to introduce herself. She was a nurse too, as it turned out, a pediatric floor, different hospital. We stood in the hallway talking for 20 minutes about nothing important. She mentioned there was a good farmer's market 3 blocks down on Saturday mornings. She mentioned the building had a rooftop that unlocked in May. I had not known either of those things. I realized that in all the months I had spent managing the fallout with my family, I had not actually gotten to know the place I lived. I had defended it without inhabiting it. That changed after. I started going to the farmer's market. I learned my neighbor's name and she learned mine, and we started walking there together some Saturdays, not because we planned it, just because we left at the same time and fell into step. I started using the rooftop in the evenings, just for an hour. Just to decompress after long shifts. I bought a small table and 2 chairs and put them in front of the west window so the light had somewhere to land. The apartment stopped feeling like a position I was defending and started feeling like a place I was living. That shift was slow and quiet and exactly right. The last time I heard from my sister-in-law directly was a voicemail she left about 6 weeks after everything happened. I listened to it once. She said she was sorry for overstepping. She didn't say she was sorry for what she had done, just for the overstepping, which is the kind of apology that tells you more about a person than any admission could. She said she hoped we could move past it for the sake of the family. I didn't call back. But I also didn't feel angry when I heard her voice. I just felt finished. There's a particular kind of done that doesn't have any heat left in it, not forgiveness exactly, but something more like indifference. The kind that comes when you've settled the account in your own mind and stopped keeping a running tab. I had earned the right to close that tab. I tell this story not because I want sympathy or because I think I handled everything perfectly. I know there were moments I could have spoken sooner, set the boundary harder before it got to a police report and a swipe card investigation. I know that, But I also know that women who set hard limits early get called difficult. We get called cold. We get told we're overreacting long before anything has escalated. So we wait, and we watch. And we give benefit of the doubt we've already used up, because we have been trained since childhood to call that patience. What I know now is that patience without a limit is just delayed surrender. I worked double shifts for 3 years. I sent money home every month. I showed up. And then I bought myself a place to rest, and I refused to apologize for it. The apartment is still mine. The locks are still changed. Dana still has the only spare. And on Sunday mornings, when the light comes through the west window and falls across the floor, it looks exactly like the first afternoon I ever stood in this space. Like something that took a long time and cost the right amount and belongs to no one else. That's not a small thing. That's everything.